The recent earthquakes in the Sierra are a great reminder of California's other very active earthquake zone. Now, when you think about earthquakes, you're probably thinking about earthquakes along the San Andreas Fault.
The San Andreas area is not new to natural disasters. Over the years, the area has witnessed landslides, wildfires, droughts, and especially, and most commonly, earthquakes. Recent news has shown that the area's earthquake streak isn't ending anytime soon. A state of emergency has been declared due to the San Andreas Fault. In fact, this fault is said to lead to an earthquake so huge that it has even been nicknamed the Big One.
I've been warned about an earthquake so strong it could produce a tsunami the size of a 10-story building. They call it the Big One.
But why is this earthquake happening now? And how big is this earthquake predicted to be? Let's find out. The San Andreas Fault and seismic concerns. Before we get into the actual details of the damage this earthquake could cause, we need to first understand why the earthquake is happening in the first place. The San Andreas Fault is a big crack in the Earth's surface that stretches across a large part of California. This crack or fault runs for about 800 miles, and it marks the boundary between two massive plates of the Earth's crust. These plates are like huge pieces of a puzzle, and they are constantly moving even though we can't feel it most of the time. One of the plates is called the Pacific Plate, and the other is the North American Plate. These two plates don't move at the same speed, which is what causes problems along the fault. The Pacific Plate is moving faster than the North American Plate. As these plates move, they grind against each other along the San Andreas Fault. But sometimes, instead of moving smoothly, the plates get stuck. When this happens, energy builds up in the fault, like stretching a rubber band. Eventually, this energy has to be released, and when it is, it causes an earthquake. Earthquakes happen when the energy stored in the fault is suddenly released, and the ground shakes. The San Andreas Fault is important because it runs through a very populated part of California. Many people live in the cities near the fault, including Los Angeles and San Francisco. Because so many people live nearby, a big earthquake along the San Andreas Fault could be very dangerous and cause a lot of damage. Scientists are especially worried about a large earthquake that they call the Big One. This would be a very strong earthquake, much stronger than most of the earthquakes that have happened along the fault in the past. One reason scientists are so worried is that there hasn't been a major earthquake along the southern part of the San Andreas Fault for a very long time. In fact, the last time a big earthquake happened in this area was more than 160 years ago in 1857. That was a long time ago, and since then, the plates have kept moving and energy has kept building up along the fault. Because this energy has not been released for such a long time, geologists believe that when it finally does release, the earthquake could be very large and cause a lot of damage. The southern part of the San Andreas Fault, which is the section that runs through Southern California, is where scientists are most concerned about. This part of the fault is said to be locked, which means that the plates are not moving smoothly past each other. Instead, they are stuck, and this is allowing a lot of energy to build up over time. Geologists compare this to stretching a rubber band more and more. The longer you stretch it, the more energy it holds, and when it snaps hard. In the same way, the longer the plates stay stuck, the more energy builds up, and the bigger the earthquake could be when the plates finally move. Scientists are trying to learn as much as they can about the San Andreas Fault so that they can warn people about the risks. They study the fault by looking at how the ground has moved in the past, and they use this information to make predictions about what might happen in the future. One thing they have learned is that big earthquakes tend to happen along the fault every 100 to 200 years. Since it has been more than 160 years since the last big earthquake in Southern California, some experts believe that the next one could happen soon. Another reason scientists are worried about the San Andreas Fault is because it runs so close to big cities. Los Angeles, for example, is only about 30 miles away from the fault. If a big earthquake happens, it could cause a lot of damage to buildings and homes in the city. Even though California has building codes that are designed to make buildings safer during earthquakes, no building is completely safe in a really big earthquake. Older buildings especially could be at risk of collapsing. When scientists talk about the Big One, they are talking about an earthquake that could have a magnitude of 8 or higher. The magnitude of an earthquake is a way of measuring how strong it is. A magnitude 8 earthquake is very strong and can cause a lot of damage. Scientists believe that there is about a 7% chance of an earthquake of this size happening along the southern San Andreas fault in the next 30 years. This might not sound like a big chance, but when you consider how much damage such an earthquake could cause, it is a serious concern. In addition to a big earthquake, scientists are also worried about the possibility of smaller but still dangerous earthquakes happening along the fault. Even an earthquake with a magnitude of 7 could cause a lot of damage. In fact, there is a 75% chance that a magnitude 7 earthquake could happen in Southern California in the next 30 years. While this kind of earthquake wouldn't be as strong as the big one, it could still cause buildings to collapse and roads to crack, and it could make life very difficult for the people who live nearby. Even though scientists are worried about the San Andreas fault, they're doing everything they can to help people prepare. In California, there are early warning systems that can give people a few seconds of warning before an earthquake happens. This might not seem like much time, but it can be enough to get to a safer place, like under a table or away from a window. Scientists are also working on making buildings stronger so that they are less likely to collapse during an earthquake. Apart from early warning systems and stronger buildings, scientists are encouraging people to be prepared for an earthquake by making emergency kits. These kits should have things like water, food, and medicine so that people can survive if the earthquake makes it hard to get help right away. Families are also encouraged to make a plan for what to do during an earthquake so that everyone knows where to go and what to do if the ground starts to shake. Even though we can't stop earthquakes from happening, we can be ready for them. Scientists are working hard to learn more about the San Andreas fault so that they can keep people safe. They know that the fault is locked and ready to release a lot of energy, and they want to make sure that everyone is prepared for the day when the earthquake finally happens. Being ready and knowing what to do can save lives and help people stay safe during a big earthquake. Now, we have established that the last time an earthquake of this magnitude happened was 160 years ago, but have there been any recent smaller earthquakes in California? The answer is yes. Earthquakes are not new to California. The state has had many earthquakes over the years, and some of them have been very destructive. For example, in 1906, there was a big earthquake in San Francisco that caused a lot of damage and killed many people. Another earthquake happened in 1989 near the same area, but it was not as strong as the one in 1906. The earthquake in 1906 was one of the biggest in history. It happened in San Francisco on April 18, 1906. The shaking began very early in the morning, at around 5:12 a.m., while most people were still asleep. The earthquake had a magnitude of about 7.8, which means it was very strong. It lasted for less than a minute, but in that short time it caused a huge amount of damage. Many buildings in San Francisco collapsed, and fires broke out all over the city. These fires were started when gas pipes broke during the earthquake, and they spread quickly because most of the buildings in San Francisco at the time were made of wood. The fires caused even more destruction than the earthquake itself. In fact, the fires burned for several days, and by the time they were put out, more than 80% of the city had been destroyed. Around 3,000 people lost their lives in the earthquake and the fires that followed. Many more were injured, and tens of thousands of people were left homeless. It was a terrible disaster, and it took many years for San Francisco to recover from it. The 1906 earthquake also caused damage in other cities nearby, but San Francisco was hit the hardest. One of the reasons the 1906 earthquake was so destructive was because the San Andreas fault had not moved significantly for a long time before the earthquake happened. All the stress that had been building up along the fault was released in a very short time, causing the ground to shake violently. Scientists later learned that the ground moved as much as 20 feet in some places during the earthquake. That's a huge amount of movement, and it's one of the reasons the earthquake was so strong. The 1906 earthquake is still remembered today as one of the worst natural disasters in U.S. history. After it happened, scientists became much more interested in studying earthquakes and trying to understand them better. They realized that the San Andreas fault was capable of causing more big earthquakes in the future. and they started to look for ways to predict when the next one might happen. It wasn't until many years later, in 1989, that another big earthquake struck Northern California. This earthquake, called the Loma Prieta earthquake, happened on October 17, 1989 at 5:04 p.m. It had a magnitude of 6.9, which is smaller than the 1906 earthquake, but it still caused a lot of damage. The Loma Prieta earthquake is named after a mountain in the Santa Cruz Mountains, near where the earthquake started. The shaking lasted for about 15 seconds, but that was enough to cause buildings to collapse, bridges to break, and roads to crack. One of the most famous images from the Loma Prieta earthquake is of the Cypress Street Viaduct, a two-level freeway in Oakland. Part of this freeway collapsed during the earthquake, crushing the cars that were driving on the lower level. Sadly, many people lost their lives in this part of the city. In total, 63 people were killed in the earthquake, and more than 3,700 were injured. While the death toll was much lower than in the 1906 earthquake, the Loma Prieta earthquake still caused a lot of damage. Thousands of people lost their homes, and parts of San Francisco and other cities were severely damaged. One of the reasons the Loma Prieta earthquake is so well known is because it happened during the 1989 World Series baseball game between the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland Athletics. The game was being held in San Francisco at Candlestick Park, and because so many people were already gathered at the stadium or watching the game on television, the earthquake was witnessed by a lot of people. The game was quickly canceled and people rushed to safety. Luckily, the stadium itself did not collapse, but the earthquake caused serious damage to other parts of the city, including the Marina District, where buildings caught fire and many houses were destroyed. Just like the 1906 earthquake, the Loma Prieta earthquake happened because of the movement along the San Andreas fault. But this time, things were very different. The fault did not move as much as it had in 1906. Instead of 20 feet, the ground moved about 7 feet during the Loma Prieta earthquake. Even though the earthquake was not as strong as the one in 1906, it still caused a lot of damage because it happened in a heavily populated area, and many buildings and roads were not designed to withstand such strong shaking. After the Loma Prieta earthquake, California made changes to make buildings and infrastructure safer. Engineers and architects started designing buildings that were better able to survive earthquakes. They reinforced bridges and freeways to make them stronger, and they made sure that new buildings were built to withstand strong shaking. However, despite these improvements, many older buildings are still at risk of collapsing in a future earthquake, especially in places like San Francisco, where some buildings were built a long time ago. One of the big differences between the 1906 earthquake and the 1989 earthquake is that the 1906 earthquake released much more stress along the San Andreas fault. Scientists believe that the 1906 earthquake helped to release some of the stress that had been building up along the northern part of the fault for hundreds of years. But since the 1989 earthquake was smaller, it didn't release as much stress. This means that there is still a lot of stress building up along the fault, and scientists are worried that another big earthquake could happen in the future. Both the 1906 and 1989 earthquakes happened in the northern part of the San Andreas fault. While these earthquakes released some of the stress that had built up in that area, scientists are especially worried about the southern part of the fault. The southern part of the San Andreas fault, which runs through Southern California, has not had a major earthquake in more than 160 years. This is a very long time for stress to build up, and geologists believe that when the southern part of the fault finally moves, it could cause a very large and dangerous earthquake. Since a newer, bigger earthquake is predicted to happen in the San Andreas area soon, what exactly are the impacts it could lead to? Let's get into it. The impact of a major earthquake on the San Andreas area. Scientists don't know yet what the magnitude of the San Andreas earthquake will be, but it is predicted to be really high and could cause some serious damage to the area. To understand how strong an earthquake is, scientists use something called the Richter scale, which measures the magnitude of an earthquake. The magnitude tells us how much energy is released during the earthquake. The higher the number on the scale, the stronger the earthquake and the more damage it can cause. When we talk about earthquakes, you might hear about magnitudes like 7, 8, or even 9. These numbers might sound close together, but the difference in how much energy is released between a magnitude 7 earthquake and a magnitude 8 or 9 is actually very big. Each time the magnitude goes up by one number, the amount of energy released increases by about 32 times. So a magnitude 8 earthquake isn't just a little stronger than a magnitude 7, it releases 32 times more energy. And if you compare a magnitude 9 earthquake to a magnitude 7, the difference is even bigger. A magnitude 9 earthquake releases 1,000 times more energy than a magnitude 7. Let's break this down a bit more. A magnitude 7 earthquake is very strong and can cause a lot of damage. Buildings might collapse, roads could crack, and people can get hurt. But if the earthquake had a magnitude of 8, the destruction would be much worse. The shaking would be more violent and it would last longer. In a magnitude 8 earthquake, many more buildings could fall down and whole neighborhoods could be destroyed. The ground might even split in some places. Now, imagine a magnitude 9 earthquake. This would be even more powerful. The ground could move so much that huge cracks could open up, and the shaking could go on for several minutes. A magnitude 9 earthquake would be a very rare and very destructive event. One important thing to understand is that while a magnitude 9 earthquake would release 1,000 times more energy than a magnitude 7 earthquake, it doesn't mean that the damage would always be 1,000 times worse. A lot depends on where the earthquake happens and how prepared people are. For example, if a magnitude 9 earthquake happens in the middle of the ocean, far away from any cities, the damage might not be that bad because there aren't any buildings or people nearby. But if the same earthquake happens near a city, it could be devastating. Hollywood movies sometimes show earthquakes causing huge, dramatic disasters like tsunamis and massive chasms opening up in the ground. While these things might make for exciting movie scenes, they are not very realistic. For example, a lot of people think that an earthquake could cause a giant tsunami, but in reality, tsunamis usually only happen when an earthquake occurs under the ocean and the seafloor moves in a certain way. Even then, it's not always guaranteed that a big wave will form. On land, earthquakes don't usually cause the ground to open up in giant cracks like we see in movies. Instead, the ground shakes and moves, but it's more likely to cause buildings to collapse or roads to break apart than to create huge holes in the earth. In real life, the destruction from an earthquake comes from things like buildings falling down, roads being destroyed, and fires breaking out. Fires can start during an earthquake when gas lines break, and this can make the damage much worse. In some cases, the shaking can also cause landslides, where the ground becomes loose and slides down hills or mountains. Landslides can bury homes, roads, and anything else in their path. In cities, earthquakes can also damage water systems, making it hard for people to get clean water. These are the kinds of realistic dangers that people face during an earthquake. Now let's talk about the economic impact of a big earthquake, especially in a place like San Andreas in South Carolina. Southern California is home to many businesses, factories, and tourist attractions. It's a very busy and important area for the economy. If a major earthquake were to hit, the damage to buildings, roads, and other infrastructure would be huge. Many businesses might have to close for a long time, and some might never reopen. This would hurt not only the business owners, but also the people who work there and rely on their jobs to make a living. Tourism is also a big part of Southern California's economy. Millions of people visit places like Los Angeles, Disneyland, and the beaches every year. If an earthquake damaged these attractions or made it unsafe for tourists to visit, the region could lose a lot of money. Hotels, restaurants, and other businesses that depend on tourists would suffer, and this could have a long-term effect on the economy. Rebuilding after a major earthquake would cost billions of dollars. Governments would need to repair roads, bridges, and other public infrastructure. Private companies and homeowners would also have to spend a lot of money to fix or replace damaged buildings. In some cases, people might not have enough insurance to cover the cost of rebuilding, and this could make recovery even harder. That's not all. Apart from the economic costs, there would also be environmental impacts. One of the most immediate dangers during an earthquake is the risk of fires. As mentioned earlier, earthquakes can cause gas lines to break, and when gas escapes, it can easily catch fire. These fires can spread quickly, especially if they start in areas where there are many buildings close together. In some cases, firefighters might not be able to get to the fires right away because roads are blocked or damaged. This means that the fires could burn for a long time and cause even more destruction. Landslides are another big environmental concern. When the ground shakes during an earthquake, it can cause soil and rocks to slide down hills and mountains. These landslides can bury homes, roads, and anything else in their path. In some cases, landslides can also block rivers or streams, which can lead to flooding. This can cause even more damage to buildings and the environment. Earthquakes can also damage water systems, which can make it difficult for people to get clean drinking water. Pipes that carry water to homes and businesses can break during an earthquake, and if these pipes are not repaired quickly, people could be left without water for days or even weeks. In some cases, contaminated water could mix with drinking water, making it unsafe to drink. All of these impacts, the economic damage, the fires, the landslides, and the water system problems, show why it is so important to have disaster response plans in place. In places like California, where earthquakes are common, people have worked hard to be ready. One of the ways people try to stay safe is by making buildings stronger. This is called retrofitting. When a building is retrofitted, special changes are made to make it better able to withstand the shaking of an earthquake. These changes might include adding steel frames to hold the building up, or making the foundation stronger so the building doesn't collapse during an earthquake. Retrofitting is very important, especially for older buildings that were not built with earthquakes in mind. California has also put in place stricter building codes. Building codes are rules that tell people how to build things like houses, offices, and schools in a way that makes them safer. These rules are important because they make sure that new buildings are strong enough to survive an earthquake. However, even with these rules, complete safety isn't possible. Some buildings might be too old or too weak to be retrofitted properly, and even new buildings can still be damaged if the earthquake is very strong. One of the ways California prepares is by using continuous monitoring. This means that scientists are always watching the ground for signs of an earthquake. They use special machines called seismometers to detect even the smallest movements in the earth. These movements can sometimes give clues about when a bigger earthquake might happen. While it's not possible to predict exactly when an earthquake will strike, continuous monitoring helps scientists understand more about earthquakes and helps them develop better ways to keep people safe. But it's not just scientists and engineers who need to be prepared. People who live in areas where earthquakes can happen, like California, need to take steps to protect themselves too. One of the most important things people can do is to prepare emergency kits. An emergency kit is a collection of supplies that people can use if an earthquake happens and they can't get help right away. A good emergency kit should include things like food, water, a flashlight, batteries, a first aid kit, and important documents. It's also a good idea to have warm clothes and blankets in case the weather is cold after the earthquake. Apart from having an emergency kit, people are encouraged to make disaster plans. A disaster plan is a plan that helps families know what to do when an earthquake happens. For example, the plan might include a safe place to meet if family members are separated during the earthquake. It's also important to know how to turn off the gas, water, and electricity in case there are problems with those systems after the earthquake. Having a disaster plan can make a big difference in how safe people are during and after an earthquake. Another important way to prepare for earthquakes is by retrofitting homes. Just like with bigger buildings, homes can be retrofitted to make them safer during an earthquake. This might involve adding braces to the walls or strengthening the foundation. While retrofitting can be expensive, it's worth it because it can save lives and reduce the damage to people's homes. Communities also need to work together to prepare for earthquakes. Community resilience means that people in a community help each other during and after an earthquake. This might involve sharing food and supplies, checking on neighbors, and helping people who are hurt. Strong communities are better able to recover from earthquakes because they can work together to solve problems and support each other. One of the most important tools that communities have to stay safe is early warning systems. Early warning systems are special systems that can detect when an earthquake is about to happen. They don't predict the earthquake, but they can give people a few seconds or even minutes of warning before the shaking starts. This might not sound like a lot of time, but even a few seconds can be enough time for people to get to a safe place or for businesses to shut down dangerous machinery. In California, there are early warning systems in place, and these systems are always being improved to make them faster and more accurate. Public education is another key part of earthquake preparedness. Public education campaigns are programs that teach people what to do during an earthquake and how to stay safe. These campaigns often focus on things like drop, cover, and hold on. This means that when the ground starts shaking, people should drop down to the ground, take cover under something sturdy like a table, and hold on until the shaking stops. This simple action can help protect people from getting hurt by falling objects or by the shaking itself. Schools, businesses, and government agencies also play a big role in earthquake preparedness. Many schools and businesses hold regular disaster drills to make sure that people know what to do when an earthquake happens. During these drills, people practice getting to a safe place and staying calm during the shaking. Government agencies also coordinate with emergency services to make sure that everyone knows their role during an earthquake. This coordination is very important because it helps make sure that emergency responders can get to the places where they are needed most. When an earthquake happens, emergency services like firefighters, police officers, and paramedics need to be ready to respond quickly. They help rescue people who are trapped, put out fires, and provide medical care to people who are hurt. In order to be effective, these emergency services need to practice regularly. That's why disaster drills and coordination among emergency services are so important. By practicing ahead of time, emergency responders can be better prepared when a real earthquake happens. Even though we can't prevent earthquakes from happening, there are many ways to reduce the damage they cause and to keep people safe. By taking these steps, lives and lots of property can be saved. So, do you believe the San Andreas area is ready to handle the disaster an earthquake can cause? Let us know in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.